Lance Armstrong was king of a cycling empire, but as we know now, it was built on a lie many helped to cover up. But one woman who knew the truth refused to play along. Betsy Andreu paid a high price for defying Lance Armstrong. She first talked with the CBC years ago. Tonight, Adrienne Arsenault has her full story. Betsy's not gloating, but as you're about to hear, she told you so.
No, here, take this one.
In so many ways, it is time for the Andreu family to harvest.
This one?
Betsy and her husband Frankie, once a cyclist on Lance Armstrong's team. A couple who endured something wretched for so long and might finally now be free. CBC first met them right here in their Michigan backyard 6 years ago. The kids were tiny. The pressures on the family, huge. Back then, they knew secrets and had evidence about Lance Armstrong and doping. They'd answered questions honestly, but few seemed to believe them, and they were starting to pay dearly for challenging a hero story.
I don't know if you're ever going to get to the truth of what's happened, meaning the past.
You have people who have perjured themselves in a civil case. There is absolute proof of that, and yet, I don't know, it just has not been reported, or not in great detail.
Back in 2006, CBC was the first broadcaster they spoke with as a couple, and they were careful.
Okay, no, but I'm just
Fine,
saying.
that's my testimony. I'm answering her question.
Sometimes stopping the interview to debate. How far should they really go?
Can we cut for a minute?
Well, it's taken a long time, but finally, what was old news to the Andreus is now out there. That Lance Armstrong was not only doping and encouraging others on his team to, but was, in the words of the U.S. anti-doping agency, the leader of the most sophisticated doping program sport has ever seen. That's a largely accepted truth now, but what may not still be really understood is what happened to the whistleblowers, especially Betsy Andreu, and what she went through as one of those who did not believe in the myth of Lance. How many Lance Armstrongs do you think there are, and how many of them have you met?
He's a chameleon. If he wants to use you, if he needs something from you, he will be charming. He will charm the heck out of you. If he wants you to shut up, if he wants to send a message, he will be threatening and intimidating. And we've seen both ends.
First, the fun Lance.
Howdy. Betsy, Frankie, smile, huh? They cheese. Is that yours?
Through much of the 90s, Frankie and Lance were teammates. Betsy often on the road with them.
Big kiss.
Young friends having a good time, supporting each other. That's why Frankie and Betsy were in an Indiana hospital room with a few others in 1996 when doctors came to talk to Lance about his cancer treatment and ask a few questions.
And then it came out, have you ever used any performance-enhancing drugs? And I mean, Lance was holding his IV and then just nonchalantly rattled off EPO, growth hormone, testosterone, cortisone, steroids. My eyes popped out of my head, and Frankie saw I was upset. We excused ourselves from the room immediately, and I turned to Frankie and I said, if you're doing that, I am not marrying you.
Also in the room that day, Stephanie McIlvaine, here with Betsy in 2000. McIlvaine was Armstrong's personal rep at Oakley, and Betsy says years later the women were still rattled by what they had heard.
We brought it up, and we were talking about the whole, do you think he got his cancer from doing all of these drugs? And Lance and Frankie actually talked about the incident as well. Lance asked Frankie, how did Betsy react to the hospital room? And Frankie said she flipped. She absolutely flipped out. So Lance knew very early on that I couldn't be relied on to go along with this part of the sport.
And yet, over the years, Armstrong did not hide some aspects of doping from Betsy. As all now know from her affidavit in the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency case, she reported that while driving her home one night, he picked up a supply of what he called liquid gold from this man. It was understood to be EPO. She and Frankie also had to wait in the car for Armstrong one day while he met with now disgraced and banned Dr. Michele Ferrari, the man accused of directing Armstrong's doping program. Lance came back to the car, excited.
He looked in the rearview mirror and he said to me, Frankie could get results, but he's too cheap. And so afterward, Frankie said to me, I don't want to spend the money, but I don't want to put all that shit in my body either.
But Frankie did succumb. He eventually did take EPO to become a faster rider, but that meant incurring the wrath of Betsy. She demanded he stop, and he did, but at a price. A salary cut from Armstrong's team and disappearing job offers. But he and Betsy stayed quiet, didn't say a word about the doping program and Armstrong. Until one day, a reporter writing a book started asking about that hospital room incident. Betsy decided she would not lie. Armstrong's spooked representatives approached Frankie to get him to convince Betsy to keep quiet. They wanted her to discredit that nosy reporter. Frankie secretly recorded what they said to him. The audio and transcript now part of USADA's case against Lance Armstrong.
I know Betsy doesn't like Lance, but it's all in our interest not to blow it or something up. So, I mean, she could make a supportive statement about Lance, or we could draw something for you to look at. I mean, she could tell them.
And I told Frankie, I'm not going to do it. And Frankie said, well, can you just say that you weren't the original source? And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. He said, but you weren't the original source. I said, get it through your head. I'm not doing it. They can't be trusted.
All this came up again in 2005, when after winning his 6th Tour de France, a company refused to give Armstrong a bonus. That's because they suspected him of doping. He got so mad he sued the company. That meant a hearing. So, to make its case, the company subpoenaed Betsy and Frankie. They called Emma O'Reilly to testify too.
Oh, there's Emma. Hey, Emma.
Oh, this is Emma. That's good.
Yeah.
That's me.
She was Armstrong's masseuse, had also spoken with that reporter who'd been snooping around. She confirmed that she'd once been asked to cover up Armstrong's needle marks and lie for him.
Betsy Andreu?
So, under oath, testimony from Betsy, Frankie, Emma, and Lance Armstrong. He wasted no time discrediting his detractors. On Emma, he said she only talked for money.
Do you believe that's why Miss O'Reilly said these things about you?
Absolutely. Pissed. Pissed at me, pissed at Johan, really pissed at Johan, pissed at the team. Afraid that we were going to out her as a, and all these things she said, as a whore or whatever, I don't know.
On Betsy, Armstrong said she only said what she did about the hospital room because she hated him. And remember all those pictures of the couples together? Armstrong said they weren't actually friends at all.
I knew her very little. Not very well.
Is it your testimony that Mr. Andrew was also lying when he said that he heard you say those things regarding your prior use?
100%. But I feel for him.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think he's trying to back up his old lady.
The case was settled. Armstrong got his money. And once he did, and word of the testimonies got out, life got worse for Betsy. In a 2007 Sports Illustrated article that was widely quoted, Armstrong referred to her as full of bitterness, jealousy, and hatred. The words for both her and Emma got nastier.
So I was the bitter, jealous, unhinged woman, and she was the alcoholic whore. He would just use the media as his bully pulpit. He told people I was literally crazy, unhinged, really fat, very ugly, doesn't know what Frankie sees in me.
Perhaps scared, others who knew the truth began to retreat. Remember Stephanie McIlvaine, Armstrong's representative at Oakley, the one who'd been in the hospital room with Betsy and Frankie and Lance and the others? Under oath, she suddenly didn't remember that moment.
At that point, I told her no. I don't remember Lance ever saying to two doctors that he used drugs.
And she spoke in defense of Lance on the stand, and then in angry late-night phone calls to Betsy.
What time of night did this call come in?
2 or 3 in the morning.
One of dozens of angry calls, and it starts abruptly.
I hope somebody breaks a baseball bat over your head. I also hope that one day you have adversity in your life and you have some type of tragedy.
Break a baseball bat over your head. That's about as clear as a threat.
Definitely make an impact on you.
She's Lance's liaison. She's on the Lance gravy train.
Betsy had spoken the truth, but she hadn't really been heard, and nothing had happened. Armstrong was not sanctioned for doping. Friends from the cycling circuit distanced themselves from Betsy. Even family members pushed back. This couple, with 3 little kids, started realizing the jobs for Frankie were drying up.
And you think that was Lance doing that?
We think it was a result. A result of everything. We went up against the machine. You don't go up against the machine.
And so, for the last few years, they have lived in a type of lonely whistleblower wilderness, personally and professionally. And then came USADA, its massive report, and a tiny section deep in the back that changed everything.
The USADA report, in the addendum part 2, they vindicated me that I told that truth about the hospital room and all the hell that Lance put me and my family through. That I told the truth, and the truth means something, and the truth is worth it.
The truth. There is still not a sound from Lance Armstrong on this sense of the truth, on what was really going on. And what about Frankie? He too is quiet, doesn't want to talk to cameras now. So it is as it was. It's up to Betsy. Her goal? Keep that family intact. To keep heads held high and try to leave Lance Armstrong behind. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Dearborn, Michigan.